In the year 2378, humanity found itself at a crossroads. For centuries, Earth had been a small, insignificant planet in the vastness of space, its people looking up at the stars and dreaming of what lay beyond. But now, those dreams were becoming reality. Humanity had built ships that could travel faster than light, explored distant planets, and even made contact with alien civilizations. Yet, despite all their progress, they were still newcomers to the galactic stage. And now, they were being called to a meeting that would determine their future. The location was Elysium Prime, a massive orbital station floating near Proxima Centauri. It was a marvel of engineering, a structure so large it could house entire cities. The station belonged to the Galactic Concord, an alliance of dozens of alien species who had banded together to maintain peace and cooperation across the galaxy. Humanity had been invited or perhaps summoned to join this group. For many, it was seen as an opportunity to secure Earth's place among the stars. For others, it felt like a test, one that could either elevate or crush them. Daniel Carter stood at the edge of the observation deck aboard the human delegation's ship, staring out at the swirling colors of Proxima Centauri's fiery surface. He was a tall man with sharp features and graying hair, his face lined with years of experience. As a diplomat, he had spent decades negotiating treaties and resolving conflicts, both on Earth and with newly discovered alien races. This mission, however, was unlike anything he had faced before. The stakes were higher, the players more complex, and the outcome uncertain. Behind him, Laura Bennett adjusted the settings on her tablet, reviewing data about the Concord's member species. She was younger than Daniel, with short brown hair, and a focused expression that rarely wavered. A brilliant astrophysicist, she had been chosen for the delegation because of her groundbreaking work on wormhole dynamics. Her research had opened up new possibilities for interstellar travel, making her one of the most respected scientists on Earth. But here, surrounded by beings who had mastered space travel millennia ago, she couldn't help but feel a little out of her depth. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Laura asked, breaking the silence. Daniel turned to look at her, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Ready or not, we don't have a choice. If we want to survive out here, we need allies." Laura nodded, but didn't respond immediately. She glanced down at her tablet again, scrolling through profiles of the alien delegates they were about to meet. There was Zorith of the Valeth, a reptilian species known for their aggressive demeanor and disdain for weaker races. Then there was Selena of the Luminari, a bioluminescent race whose motives were as mysterious as their glowing skin. Each species brought its own agenda to the table, and navigating those agendas would be no easy task as their ship docked with Elysium Prime. The weight of the moment settled over them. The airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor bathed in soft blue light. Alien guards stood at attention, their weapons holstered, but clearly visible. They escorted the human delegation to the main chamber, a cavernous room filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Strange shapes and sizes moved around the space, some towering over the humans, while others hovered silently above the ground. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped forward, leading the way. He scanned the room, noting the expressions, or lack thereof, in the faces of the aliens. Some watched the humans with curiosity, others with suspicion. Zoreth, seated near the center of the chamber, fixed his cold, unblinking eyes on Daniel. His scales shimmered under the artificial light, giving him an almost otherworldly appearance. "Welcome, humans," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It belonged to the Concord's current leader, a being named Valthar of the Zindari. Their form was fluid, constantly shifting between states of matter, making it difficult to focus on them for too long. "We have awaited your arrival with great interest." Daniel inclined his head slightly, a gesture meant to convey respect without appearing submissive. "Thank you for inviting us," he said, his tone calm but firm. We are eager to discuss how humanity can contribute to the goals of the Galactic Concord. Valthar's shape rippled, and for a moment, it seemed as though they were smiling. Contribution is indeed what we seek. However, we must also address concerns regarding your recent advancements. Your technology has grown rapidly, perhaps too rapidly, for a species of your age. Laura stepped forward, her tablet clutched tightly in her hands. Our advancements are a testament to human ingenuity and determination, she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. But they are not a threat. We seek only to explore, to learn, and to share our discoveries with others. Zorath let out a low growl, drawing everyone's attention. Share, or conquer. He spat, his forked tongue flicking as he spoke. Your kind has barely emerged from your cradle world, yet you already claim dominion over technologies far beyond your understanding. How can we trust you? The tension in the room thickened, palpable enough to choke on. Daniel raised a hand, signaling for calm. We understand your concerns, Zorath, he said, but mistrust will get us nowhere. Let us focus on finding common ground. For a moment, it seemed as though Zorath might lash out, his claws flexing dangerously. But then Valthar intervened, their form undulating soothingly. Let us proceed with caution, but also with hope, they said. Perhaps this meeting will mark the beginning of a new era for all of us. And so, the negotiations began. The next day, the negotiations resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. The tension from the previous session lingered like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. Daniel Carter and Laura Bennett entered the chamber with determined expressions, though both carried the weight of uncertainty. They knew the Concord's patience was wearing thin, and humanity's future hung precariously in the balance. As they took their seats, Zorath of the Velith glared at them with undisguised hostility, his tail twitching like a predator ready to strike. Valthar, the ever-shifting leader of the Zindari, began the session with an attempt to steer the conversation toward compromise. Let us focus on solutions, they said, their voice flowing like water over stones. Humanity has expressed its desire to join the Concord. What steps must be taken to ensure mutual trust? Before Daniel could respond, another delegate, a slender, bird-like being named Kellis, spread her feathered wings slightly and spoke. Trust is earned, not given freely, she said, her tone sharp but measured. Your kind has shown remarkable progress, humans, but progress without restraint is dangerous. We cannot ignore the risks your technology poses. Laura leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly together. We understand your concerns, she said, but restricting our advancements would cripple our ability to grow and contribute. Isolation won't make us safer, will only breed resentment. Kellis tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing. Resentment is a small price to pay for stability. The Concord exists to maintain order, not to cater to ambition. Daniel interjected before Laura could retort. Ambition drives innovation, he said firmly. Without it, none of us would be here today. Humanity is willing to work within the Concord's framework, but we cannot abandon our identity or potential. Zorath let out a low growl, his claws tapping impatiently on the table. Identity, potential. These are meaningless words to shield your true intentions. You seek power, plain and simple. Laura's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. If seeking power means striving to improve ourselves and help others, then yes, we seek it, but not at the cost of harming anyone else. Her words seemed to resonate with some of the delegates, particularly Selena of the Luminari, whose glowing form shimmered softly as she floated closer. Perhaps there is merit in what the humans say, she suggested. Their willingness to adapt and collaborate could strengthen the Concord, not weaken it. Zorath snapped his teeth together angrily. Enough, he barked. You speak as if their presence is a gift. It is a threat, a disruption to the balance we have fought centuries to maintain. The room erupted into arguments once again, voices overlapping in a cacophony of accusation and defense. Daniel stood up, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Please," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "This conflict serves no one. If the Concord believes restrictions are necessary, then name them. Tell us what you require, and we will find a way to meet your terms." Valthar's form rippled, their shifting body casting strange shadows across the chamber. "Very well," they said. "The Concord demands that humanity relinquish control over certain technologies, deemed too volatile for independent use. This includes faster-than-light drives, quantum encryption systems, and any research related to artificial intelligence." The room fell silent as the weight of the ultimatum settled over the humans. Laura felt her heart sink, her mind racing. With the implications, losing access to those technologies would set Earth back decades, perhaps even centuries. She glanced at Daniel, who looked equally stunned, but quickly masked his emotions with a stoic expression. "We cannot agree to that," Daniel said finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Those technologies are vital too, our survival and growth. Without them, we would be vulnerable not just to external threats, but to stagnation." Zorath smirked triumphantly, his forked tongue flicking as he leaned back in his seat. "Then you leave us no choice. Refuse, and you will face isolation. The Concord will sever all ties with Earth, leaving you to fend for yourselves against the dangers of the galaxy." Laura clenched her fists under the table, her frustration bubbling to the surface. Is this really about protecting the galaxy, or about keeping humanity subordinate? She demanded, her voice rising. "You're asking us to kneel, and we won't do that." The chamber buzzed with murmurs, some supportive, others condemning. Valthar's shape swirled uneasily, as if unsure how to proceed. "Consider your decision carefully," they said. "The Concord does not issue threats lightly." Daniel exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He knew the stakes. Accepting the ultimatum meant sacrificing Earth's autonomy, while rejecting it risked alienating the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. But deep down, he also knew that giving in would betray everything humanity stood for. He turned to Laura, meeting her gaze. She nodded almost imperceptibly, her resolve matching his own. Together, they rose from their seats, drawing the attention of every delegate in the room. "Thank you for your time," Daniel said, his voice clear and unwavering. "But humanity will not surrender its future. If the Concord sees us as a threat, simply because we refuse to bow, then we have no place here." Laura stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "We came seeking partnership, not submission. If this is how the Concord defines unity, then we want no part of it." With that, she turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing through the chamber. Daniel followed close behind, his head held high. The human delegation trailed after them, their faces a mix of pride and apprehension. Behind them, the chamber erupted into chaos once more, shouts and accusations filling the air as they boarded their ship and prepared to leave Elysium Prime. Laura stared out the window at the swirling colors of Proxima Centauri. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked quietly. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression thoughtful but resolute. "It doesn't matter what I think," he said. "What matters is that we stood by our principles. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." And as their ship detached from the station and began its journey back to Earth, the universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do next. The return to Earth was a somber journey. Daniel Carter and Laura Bennett sat in silence for much of the trip, each lost in their own thoughts. The weight of their decision hung over them like a storm cloud, heavy and unrelenting. They had walked away from the Galactic Concord, rejecting their demands and choosing instead to stand by humanity's principles. But now, as they approached their home planet, the reality of what lay ahead began to sink in. News of their departure from Elysium Prime had already reached Earth before their arrival. By the time their ship touched down at the United Nations spaceport in Geneva, the world was buzzing with reactions. Social media platforms were flooded with posts, some praising the delegation for their boldness, others criticizing them for potentially endangering humanity's future. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, holding signs that read, "No compromise," and "Earth stands alone." On television screens across the globe, analysts debated whether the decision was an act of courage or reckless defiance. President Rachel Monroe called an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council shortly after the delegation landed. She greeted Daniel and Laura personally, her expression a mix of pride and concern. "You've made a difficult choice," she said, shaking their hands firmly. "Now we need to figure out how to move forward." Daniel nodded, his face lined with fatigue. "We did what we believed was right," he said. "But I won't. Light wasn't easy. The Concorde isn't going to take this lightly," Laura added, her voice quieter but no less determined. "They see us as a threat because we refuse to bow. That means we need to prepare for anything." Inside the council chamber, representatives from every nation listened intently as Daniel and Laura recounted the events at Elysium Prime. When they finished, the room erupted into a flurry of questions and opinions. Some leaders argued that reopening negotiations was still possible, while others insisted that humanity should focus on strengthening its defenses. President Monroe raised her hand to quiet the room, her commanding presence silencing the chatter. "We cannot undo what has been done," she said, her tone firm but measured, "but we can decide how to respond. Humanity has always thrived under pressure, and today is no different. From this moment on, Earth will chart its own course. We will not rely on the Concorde or anyone else to determine our fate." Her words were met with applause, though not everyone looked convinced. As the meeting adjourned, Daniel caught snippets of hushed conversations among the delegates. Some praised the president's resolve, while others whispered about the risks of isolation. He knew that public support would be crucial in the days to come, but he also understood that fear could quickly turn into panic if tensions escalated back in New York City. Laura retreated to her lab, where she threw herself into her work. The prototype fleet of autonomous starships she had been developing suddenly felt more urgent than ever. These vessels were designed to patrol distant sectors of space, equipped with advanced sensors and weaponry capable of defending human colonies. She worked late into the night, her mind racing with calculations and simulations. Every hour spent improving the ships felt like a step toward securing humanity's independence. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled to adjust to life back on Earth. Though retired from active diplomacy, he found himself drawn into discussions about the growing crisis. He appeared on news programs, wrote opinion pieces, and gave lectures at universities, urging caution and unity. Walking away from the Concorde was necessary, he told one interviewer, but it doesn't mean we're invincible. We need to be smart, strategic, and above all, united. Despite his efforts, not everyone agreed with him. Critics accused him of being too pessimistic, arguing that humanity's rejection of the Concorde's ultimatum was a declaration of strength, not weakness. Others pointed to Earth's recent technological advancements as proof that humanity could stand on its own. Daniel listened to these arguments with a mixture of frustration and understanding. He didn't doubt humanity's potential, but he also knew that hubris could lead to disaster. Tensions continued to rise as reports surfaced of unidentified ships lurking near human colonies. At first, these sightings were dismissed as routine patrols by curious alien species. But when a mining outpost in the Orion Belt came under attack, the mood shifted dramatically. Survivors described ships bearing markings similar to those of the Valith, Zoriths species. The incident sparked outrage across Earth, with many calling for retaliation. Military commanders scrambled to prepare for the possibility of war. Orbital defense platforms armed with plasma cannons were constructed around key locations, including major cities and industrial hubs. Fleets of human starships were mobilized, ready to respond to any further aggression. Laura's autonomous vessels became a critical part of the strategy, their ability to operate independently making them invaluable assets. Amid the chaos, Daniel grew increasingly uneasy. He attended a private briefing with President Monroe, where intelligence officers presented evidence linking the attacks to the Concorde door, at least factions within it. "This is exactly what I feared," Daniel said, rubbing his temples. "Zur and his allies are using this as an excuse to justify their hostility." Monroe nodded grimly. "Then we have no choice but to fight back. If they want a war, we'll give them one." Daniel hesitated, his instincts telling him to push for diplomacy. But deep down, he knew it might be too late for that. The line had been drawn, and humanity had chosen its side. As he left the briefing, he couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was watching and judging. In the weeks that followed, Earth braced itself for the unknown. Billboards and advertisements encouraged citizens to remain vigilant, while schools conducted drills to prepare for potential emergencies. Despite the fear, there was also a sense of determination. Humanity had walked away from the Concorde, refusing to bend to their demands. Now, they would prove that standing alone didn't mean standing weak. As Laura stared at the holographic display of her latest starship design, she allowed herself a small smile. The road ahead would be difficult, perhaps even dangerous. But if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was rising to the challenge. And as long as people like her and Daniel refused to give up, Earth would find a way to survive and thrive. The weeks following humanity's rejection of the Concorde's ultimatum were filled with tension and uncertainty. Earth had chosen to stand alone, but standing alone came with risks and enemies. Reports of strange ships lurking near human colonies became more frequent, and whispers of sabotage spread like wildfire. Laura Bennett spent nearly every waking moment in her lab, fine-tuning the autonomous starships she hoped would protect humanity from whatever threats lay ahead. Her hands moved quickly over her tablet, adjusting algorithms and testing simulations. She barely noticed the hours slipping by, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Daniel Carter, on the other hand, found himself struggling to find his place. Though retired from active diplomacy, he couldn't ignore the growing unease around him. He attended meetings with military leaders, gave interviews to news outlets, and even joined debates at universities. But no matter how many speeches he made or articles he wrote, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming, something darker. The galaxy wasn't just watching, it was waiting. One evening, as Daniel sat in his apartment staring out at the city skyline, his phone buzzed with an alert. It was a message from President Rachel Monroe. "Emergency briefing. Be here in 30 minutes." His stomach tightened as he grabbed his coat and headed for the car. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. The briefing took place in a secure underground facility beneath the United Nations headquarters. When Daniel arrived, he found Laura already there, along with a group of high-ranking officials and military commanders. The room was dimly lit, dominated by a large screen displaying images of damaged mining outposts and destroyed cargo ships. President Monroe stood at the front, her expression grim. "We've confirmed multiple attacks on our colonies," she began, her voice steady but heavy with concern. "These aren't random acts of piracy. They're coordinated assaults, likely carried out by factions within the Concorde door, acting on their behalf." Laura leaned forward, her eyes scanning the images. "Do we know who's responsible?" she asked. Monroe nodded toward an intelligence officer who stepped up to explain. "We've identified markings on some of the attacking ships. They match those used by the Valeth, specifically Zorth's fleet. While we can't prove direct orders from the Concorde leadership, it's clear they're testing us." A murmur rippled through the room, and Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Zorath had always been hostile, but this was worse than he'd feared. The attacks weren't just warnings, they were provocations, designed to push humanity into making a mistake. "What's our response plan?" Daniel asked, breaking the silence. The military commander, General Hayes, stepped forward. "We're preparing a defensive perimeter around key colonies and industrial zones. Orbital platforms are being armed with plasma cannons, and we're deploying Laura's autonomous starships to patrol vulnerable sectors. If they attack again, we'll be ready." "But retaliation isn't enough," Laura interjected. "We need to think long-term. These skirmishes could escalate into full-scale war if we're not careful." Daniel agreed. "We have to show strength without escalating the situation further. Every move we make will be scrutinized, not just by the Concord, but by the rest of the galaxy." President Monroe nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's focus on deterrence. We'll send a message to the Concord, letting them know we won't tolerate aggression. At the same time, we'll strengthen our alliances with neutral species. Humanity may have walked away from the Concord, but we don't have to face this alone." As the meeting adjourned, Daniel caught Laura's arm before she left. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I'm okay. Just tired. This feels like it's never going to end." "It might not," Daniel admitted, "but we've got each other, and we've got Earth behind us." Days turned into weeks, and the attacks continued, though none were as devastating as the first. Humanity's defenses held firm, thanks in large part to Laura's innovations. Her autonomous starships proved highly effective, patrolling distant sectors and intercepting enemy vessels before they could cause significant damage. News of their success boosted morale back on Earth, where people rallied around the idea of resilience and self-reliance, but tensions remained high. In the media, analysts debated whether humanity's isolation was a blessing or a curse. Some argued that cutting ties with the Concord had freed Earth to pursue its own destiny. Others warned that without allies, humanity risked being overwhelmed by superior forces. Daniel watched these discussions closely, noting the growing divide between optimism and fear. One night, as he scrolled through news feeds on his tablet, a headline caught his eye. "Mysterious signal detected near Proxima Centauri." Curious, he clicked on the article and read about a strange transmission intercepted by Earth's deep space array. Scientists were working to decode it, but initial analysis suggested it wasn't from any known alien species. The next morning, Daniel received another call from President Monroe. "Get to the spaceport," she said. "We've decoded the signal. It's a message from someone new." When Daniel arrived, Laura was already there, surrounded by technicians analyzing data. Her face lit up when she saw him. "You're not going to believe this," she said, handing him a tablet. The message was simple but profound. "To the humans of Earth, we observe your courage. We wish to speak." "Who sent it?" Daniel asked, his heart racing. "We don't know yet," Laura replied. "But whoever they are, they seem friendly, or at least neutral." President Monroe entered the room, her expression a mix of hope and caution. "This could change everything," she said. "If we play our cards right, we might have found ourselves a new ally." Over the next few days, communication with the mysterious sender intensified. They identified themselves as the Krylos, previously unknown alien civilization. Their leader Syra explained that her people had long observed the Concord's manipulative practices and admired humanity's boldness in standing up to them. The Krylos offered assistance, sharing advanced technology and intelligence in exchange for cooperation. For the first time in months, Daniel felt a glimmer of hope. With the Krylos' help, humanity might finally have the edge it needed to thrive in a galaxy that still viewed them as outsiders. But even as alliances formed, Daniel knew one thing for certain. The Concord wouldn't take this development lightly. The stage was set for a showdown, and humanity would need all the strength it could muster.